Welcome to Eggs and Issues, a monthly business forum presented by the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce, bringing timely economic discussion to the region for nearly 40 years. Thank you to our sponsors and partners. Presenting sponsors, Bank of America and Martins Point Healthcare. Cooperating sponsor, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Reception sponsors, Clark Insurance, Key Bank, and Viral. Community Corner sponsor, Goral Palmer. Tomorrow's Leaders and Entrepreneurs sponsors, AAA Northern New England and ProSearch. Coffee sponsor, Skowhegan Savings. Parking sponsor, Vitalius Real Estate Group. Media partners, radio sponsor, WGAN. Print sponsor, The Forecaster. TV sponsor, WMTW Maine CW. Business news sponsor, Maine Biz, with production support provided by Headlight. And thank you to our special community partners, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, MEMIC, Spectrum Healthcare Partners, Southern Maine Community College, and the University of Southern Maine. And now, please welcome Portland Community Chamber President, Britt Vitalius.
Good morning, and welcome to our January 2022 Eggs and Issues program, the monthly business breakfast event series of the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. As we continue the 2021-22 Eggs and Issues season, I would like to welcome everyone joining us today as we all are participating virtually. My name is Britt Vitalius. I'm the owner of Vitalius Real Estate Group, a real estate brokerage located here in Portland, and I'm honored to serve as the volunteer president of the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. At first, I just want to say thanks for joining us virtually. We'd planned to do this in person, but we're able to quickly adapt. And I want to remind everyone that hopefully next month, we will be back in person. While we've been doing this as a hybrid event for quite a while, we've been doing it very safely in person, proof of vaccination, wearing masks, but also sitting spaced out, having a nice breakfast. So encourage everyone to come back. Hopefully we get over this last wave and can rejoin each other together in person next month. Have you ever noticed that at the grocery store, that the shelves don't look right? That there are a lot of empty or partially empty shelves, or how long it takes to get a bike part or a car or a window? Well, today's presentation is a timely discussion on the global supply chain issue that recently affected holiday purchases and continues to affect the retail markets like automotive, grocery, and apparel. Strengthening the supply chain, a 2022 outlook, will be moderated by Curtis Picard, president of the Retail Association of Maine. Our panelists include Wally Camp, president of Rowe Automotive Group, Scott Craig, director of New Strategy and Channel Optimization at ADUSA Procurement, and Tim Cahill, vice president of sourcing at LL Bean. But before we hear from our presenters, I would like to share our appreciation to all our sponsors of Eggs and Issues who make this event possible, whether we are in person or virtual. Did you know that Eggs and Issues would not be possible without their extra support? While this is Portland's premier business event, it is funded like many arts organizations, such as a symphony or the theater. It means that ticket sales, while even when things are normal, only cover a portion of the total cost of putting on this great event. So please note and thank our sponsors when you can. Together with your support, we are able to be here today and at every Eggs and Issues event. So let's start first and foremost with our presenting sponsors, Bank of America and Martins Point Healthcare. I also want to thank our generous sponsors, cooperating sponsor, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, our reception sponsors, Clark Insurance, Key Bank, and Viral, our community corner sponsor, Goral Palmer, Tomorrow's Leaders and Entrepreneurs sponsors, AAA Northern New England, and ProSearch. Through this program, the Chamber can offer students in the region, high school and college, an invitation to attend Eggs and Issues at no cost. Welcome to all our region students who are tuning in and joining us today. And I can tell you, at past events in person, there are a bunch of students there, and it's really fun and great to have folks here. Our coffee sponsor, Skowhegan Savings. Our parking sponsor, Vitalius Real Estate Group. A special thank you to our media partners, The Forecaster, WGAN, WMTW, Maine CW, and Maine Biz. FMI, our For More Information sponsor, the Portland Public Library, and production support is provided by Headlight Audio Visual. And to the Holiday Inn by the Bay. While we are not meeting in person today, please know that we have been able to gather safely since September. As I mentioned, we require proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test, and spaced out at the tables, and have really great been reconnecting with people. So a very special thank you to our special community partners who sponsor all of our chamber initiatives: Anthem, Spectrum Healthcare Partners, University of Southern Maine Community College, and MEMIC. Let's have a virtual round of applause for all of our generous sponsors. Before we begin today's program, I would like to also welcome our newest members of the Chamber. Over the past quarter, the Chamber has welcomed nearly 24 new members, ranging in size and scope from nonprofit support agencies to large hotel groups, machine manufacturing to local restaurants, and janitorial services to the creative arts. The Chamber membership is as diverse as the Portland region's business community. Now, on to our presentation. As a reminder, like all Eggs and Issues programs, we will be recording the event today, which will be available on the Chamber's YouTube channel. Please submit any questions for our panel in the chat, and if time allows, we'll incorporate any audience questions into the discussion. If you have any additional questions following today's program, you're welcome to send them to the Chamber at chamber@portlandregion.com. Today's topic: strengthening the global supply chain, a 2022 outlook. This will be a moderated discussion that will dig into the ongoing challenges and some of the solutions that have emerged. And we really have an all-star cast today to tackle this. The discussion will be moderated by Curtis Picard of the Retail Association of Maine. We are also fortunate to have Wally Camp of Rowe Automotive Group, Scott Craig of ADUSA Procurement, and Tim Cahill from LL Bean. This diverse panel covers the automotive, grocery, and outdoor adventure retail industries. Their combined decades of experience offers unique insights into the challenges posed by ongoing supply chain issues and how their companies have responded. At this time, it is my privilege to introduce today's moderator, Curtis Picard. Take it away, Curtis.
Thank you, Brett, and thank you to the Portland Community Chamber for inviting me to participate in this month's Eggs and Issues. I was chuckling a little bit at the headshot that was used. I actually had a beard when the start of the pandemic started. I shaved it off and then grew it back again. So it was funny to see that. I got to see the chamber staff in action over the last couple of weeks, taking care of every detail. And as we pivoted from what was going to be an in-person event to online once again, and I sincerely appreciate all the hard work the chamber staff has done to organize and market this event. As the head of the Retail Association, we work with retailers of all shapes and sizes, and the supply chain challenges have been front and center since the start of the pandemic. And while it's true the pandemic is one of the major causes, the roots of the issue, believe it or not, can be traced all the way back to 2007, 2008 with the Great Recession, which is when I started this position, believe it or not. Back then, when the economy took the downturn, one of the ways retailers adapted to survive was to cut back on inventories. It used to be that you'd go into a store and see stacks and stacks of different sizes, colors of goods, you name it. However, the Great Recession forced many businesses to rethink their inventory model and move to more of a just-in-time inventory system. For the consumer, those changes over the last 10 plus years may have seemed subtle, but they've been there. Then the pandemic hit and all the upheaval that went with it. Although it's giving me flashbacks, those early pandemic weeks when we're all worried about toilet paper, yeast, and flour gave us our first taste of supply chain disruption. And that's because retailers got very good at predicting supply needs under normal circumstances, or even during bad weather emergencies. Believe it or not, a lot goes on behind the scenes to move goods around in advance of bad weather. But the pandemic created situations that no one had ever experienced before. Now, 2+ years into the pandemic, and we're still seeing significant issues in the supply chain. There are news stories almost daily about shortages, and I can tell you that even leading up to Thanksgiving, my colleague at the Maine Grocers and Food Producers Association fielded some media questions about whether or not there would be enough turkeys or cranberry sauce at Thanksgiving. Certainly there was. In addition to the pandemic, workforce shortages throughout manufacturing and distribution, large weather disruptions, and dramatically changed consumer demand have all played a role. And if I can close with a bit of good news from my retail members, nationally, holiday shopping increased 14.1% year over year. And we believe that the supply chain issues helped encourage people to shop more locally. We won't know Maine's numbers until mid-February, but we hope to show similar results. But there are still issues in the supply chain, and I'm delighted to be joined by some great Maine experts to talk about these issues and some ideas of how and when things will get better. And if we can bring in our panel. There we go. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Wally, I'm going to start with you. Wally, I have a 2013 car. I just rolled past 150,000 miles. I always try to get at least 200,000 miles out of my cars, but will likely be in the market for a new car within the next year or two. Mm-hmm. How has the pandemic impacted the amount of vehicles your dealerships have in stock? And how does 2022 outlook compare to pre-pandemic 2019 levels? I'm also hearing that my 2013 might actually be in pretty good demand right now.
Yeah, used vehicles are definitely getting a premium. It's a great time to trade a vehicle, no question. To give you a contrast in terms of what we had on the ground, let's say in 2019 versus where we are today, we typically would have something a little under or over 1,000 new vehicles on the ground between here and Westbrook and Auburn, and now where it's more like 100 or 200. It's dramatically different, and how we go to business and to market has to be different as well. As an example, today when a customer comes in, they have less to look at, so what we do is our best to go through the features and benefits. And also today, customers can go online and do a lot of research where in the past they weren't able to do so. They can sit and build their own vehicle and have a pretty good idea what they're interested in before they come in. Most people though want to road test vehicles. They want to get a feel. They want to be able to sit in the seat. They want to be able to actually feel how it goes down the road, fit and finish, quality, various things like that. So that part of the process is very similar, but far more, work with people on texting, online, even doing some at home stuff. So various things.
So Tim and Scott, Wally's examples with automobiles can certainly apply to things like furniture and appliances, larger ticket items that have more limited inventory and longer production times. However, both of you sell products that traditionally have larger inventory availability and turnover more quickly. So I'll start with you, Tim, from LL Bean. Tim, how has Beans worked with your suppliers to overcome some of these challenges like logistics, accounting, fulfillment, you name it?
Yeah, those are great questions, Curtis, and I could talk all day about that, as you can imagine, but kind of take it up a high level. LL Bean operates with a stakeholder philosophy, and we consider our suppliers part of that stakeholder group. We have hundreds of suppliers located across the globe, but we have 40 suppliers that provide about 80% of our total inventory. So as you can imagine, that's where our real focus has been through the pandemic. And there are two big issues, highly publicized, the pandemic's impact on your supplier's capacity, their ability to produce goods, and then the logistics issues out there that have just extended lead times to extraordinary levels. So that whole challenge around getting the goods. And so we've learned a lot over the past 2 years, and we've had some success. And what I consider to be our pandemic playbook, there are a couple of basic high-level approaches in there. One, first and foremost, keeping open lines of communication. Those vendors I talked about, those suppliers, we have long-standing relationships with them and great open lines of communication. And with things developing so quickly, having constant communication was key. and sharing that information both with our suppliers and with our internal organization, and then ultimately to our customer, which I think we're going to talk a little bit more about later. The next item, you hit on it. It's, we typically are really trying to manage our inventory to just in time. And we decided we needed to be much more aggressive with that. And we got executive level support to up our inventory buying forecast, because we were pretty confident with strong sales, but we were concerned that we weren't going to get everything. So we took a bit of a risk to overbuy. And within that, we really developed some very robust prioritization tools, because as the pandemic spread and as it moved around, suppliers were hit at different times and in increasing or decreasing their capacities. The key was to tell them exactly what we need. So if they can only make 60% of what you forecasted, you really want to know what that 60% is. And then you want to be flexible, so that in the event you can't get what you need, how do you direct additional suppliers to ramp up where they can produce to get you similar product, or to sort of use those additional products that you can get to compensate for the things that you couldn't. And then the last piece is really to lean in with those suppliers. And we had real concerns about their financial stability and their employee safety, and talking about that with them and sharing best practices we learned from others around how to manage within a COVID environment, and how to keep your employees safe. And then the cash flow piece, with all of the delays that our suppliers are experiencing, they're typically paid on net terms after delivery of product, and that was extended. So we compromised and we worked with them, and we reduced those terms to help keep them solvent, because they're the key to our success. I'm happy to say that it's been a real challenge, but we've been able to meet our customers' expectations and to support some pretty strong sales.
And I have to believe that you're saying that 40% of your suppliers produce 80% of your inventory. I have to believe that your relationships with that 40% is just so incredibly strong now, because you work cooperatively. And I guess it was even similar for us in the retail association world. I'm sure it's true for the Portland Chamber as well. During the pandemic, you build these relationships with your members, and in your case, your suppliers, to show value and help them out, because we were all in this together. So you probably have some really strong relationships now that are going to be long lasting.
We do indeed, and we invest in those relationships and always have. We have high social responsibility standards. Our barrier of entry and exit is high with our suppliers, and the goodwill that you build up with understanding and helping and working versus trying to pressure them into meeting demand and holding them accountable to expectations that the pandemic just changed. So yeah, that flex and that goodwill we've found to serve us well over time.
Yeah. Scott, everyone hits a grocery store at least once a week. In my family, it's definitely probably 2 or 3 times a week, because I have a very hungry teenage boy. But the supply chain issues at the grocery store level are really pretty tangible for consumers. So how has the grocery store business changed during the pandemic, and how have you been adapting?
Curtis, thanks. It's been quite a roller coaster. Just for clarity, everybody, I'm ADUSA Procurement, but here in Maine, it's Hannaford Brothers. So we support 5 retail chains up and down the East Coast. So I'll use the Hannaford lens, because that's where I am 2 or 3 times a week. But what I would tell you is, so since the start of the pandemic, obviously we've seen an acceleration in the move to e-commerce, where people weren't comfortable potentially shopping in the store, but we're fine with ordering the product online and either picking it up in store or having it delivered to their house. So that brought a bunch of challenges, because we were prepared to roll at a much more gradual rate, and that happened very, very quickly. The other thing that happened was just a bullwhip from March, when this all started. Everybody went to the grocery store. Everybody bought their toilet paper and went back home. And then we all scrambled with everybody else to try to fill the pipeline back up. we, like LL Bean, we're running our inventory just in time. We prided ourselves on short lead times, being great relationships with our suppliers, move quickly to do different things. And what we found is we've had to take bigger inventory positions on product to ensure that we have product available for our customers, and that we can ride out, any of the short-term things that happen. And everybody's seeing cat food, I guess, is a great example. Whether it's ingredients coming from overseas, or whether it's cans potentially being in short supply, that's been a challenge. Resin for Gatorade bottles last summer was a problem, so we had shortages there. So we're seeing a lot of in and out as manufacturers, potentially their facilities get hit with a COVID wave. They may take a week off or a couple of days off, and that disrupts the supply chain. So you'll see periodic outages across. We're trying to spread out on product that's available, and then get back in stock as fast as we can on some of the other things. And we're partnering very closely with our suppliers as well, to have a better understanding of what their both short-term outlook is and long-term outlook. And then we're sharing things like transportation has been a challenge, I think, for everybody. And we have a fleet up and down the East Coast that's pretty good size, that we're able to pick product up where traditionally we might have had the vendor deliver that type of thing. So all of those things are things that we've done, as well as creating non-traditional partnerships. The restaurant business was hit pretty hard, especially early in COVID. And we partnered with companies that supplied restaurants to get food to our customers. So some of those things.
I'm glad you mentioned that last example, because I remember that clearly, when that first summer during the pandemic, when things were shut down, restaurants in particular, it was really eye-opening to me. And I think we've always known it, that there are these different supply chain channels that typically just supply restaurants, or they supply schools. And then more people everybody was at home working from home. So now we're eating 3 meals at home a day, whereas you may have had a school-aged child that was getting, their school meals, and, your typical family goes out to eat. But it wasn't easy to change those supply chains quickly. Talk a little bit about that, and also call it occupational hazard, but I've been in this position long enough that I understand the grocery business pretty well, and I'm always amazed how quickly a grocery store inventory turns over. That the products that you have on the shelf don't last multiple weeks. I mean, you have perishables, but even just the shelf stable stuff, that stuff turns over really, really quickly.
It does, and some of the challenges we face when our organization is. Think of it kind of like the Army. We run really well, and we do big things consistently every day, and turn over product very quickly, and all of that. To make a change is very, very difficult. Just the number of processes that it impacts. And as we were going to partnership with some of these suppliers that do restaurants, the packaging sizes were different. Just the packaging wasn't ready for retail, so we had to repackage product. There were just a lot of things. Their trucks are smaller because they have to work into restaurants, and they're doing multiple deliveries rather than one big delivery to a grocery chain. So it's that was a unique set of challenges that I think as supply chain geeks, it's fun. I mean, it was a masterclass in how creative could you be? How many different things could you do? What could you do to really impact the business? And that was a lot of fun. But you're right. We turn over our stores really quickly. The product, for the most part, even dry grocery product, is on the shelf for less than a couple of weeks. So, and then the fresh product, if you disrupt a delivery or two, you see a lot of holes in the shelf really fast. So that's been a challenge. We've done things like we've added distribution capacity up and down the East Coast, partnerships with third-party providers, or we've acquired a couple of locations to just increase the amount of product that we can hold at a particular time to be able to support the business.
So you mentioned online shopping earlier on, and of course, Hannaford To Go was really just coming online when the pandemic hit, and certainly a lot of my larger retail members had already been making the transition to buy online, pick up in store. And I've said multiple times during the pandemic that it really was a watershed movement. That a lot of times these things start out with our larger retailers first, and then they trickle down to the smaller ones. In my mind, and in talking with folks, the pandemic enabled retail to jump ahead probably 5 years technology-wise in a matter of months. Stores that may not have had a robust e-commerce platform needed to shift to that. They had to figure out curbside pickup really, really quickly. And certainly the larger folks like you and Target and some of those other folks had already been going down that path, what we call omni-channel. You want to be where your consumers are, whether that's in person, online, get delivery at home, pick it up. You got to be there for your consumers. So Wally, I'll shift back to you, and you mentioned it as well. It's much easier now to buy a car online. How has that changed what you're doing? There's much more competition in your field now with some online only folks, and that's something we've been seeing in retail for years and years now. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. What we find is that certainly, as I previously mentioned, people are doing a lot of research online, and even some of the manufacturers have built the vehicle online where you can go through the options and get even YouTube information about looking over various features of the vehicles, et cetera. So you can really get a lot done. There are some formats that would actually allow you to do the whole transaction online. We find, though, that mostly that folks like to do their research online, even get payments and get some estimates on trade, but typically they like to come in or we go to them, and so they can touch the vehicle, drive the vehicle, connect with our salespeople, and have a feel for us and see how they feel doing business with us. That process has been really clear to the customer and forthright, and actually a little bit faster that way.
So Wally, a quick follow-up, because I think one of the examples that everybody's been aware of during this pandemic was this microchip shortage from a factory, I believe, in Taiwan, that was really hampering your industry. But I believe beyond microchips, you're talking about parts as well. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about where it was and where it's going? What's the outlook down the road?
Well, that's a good question. Wish I knew the answer for sure. But one thing I would say is that vehicles are pretty complex little animals. There are about 30,000 components per vehicle on average. So it's definitely been difficult beyond the microchip area when you're dealing with a pandemic that's rippled through various suppliers. There are times when people come in and we just don't have the part, and we do our best to give them a loaner car or get a rental vehicle. But we found if there's extended waits, even that becomes difficult. So we've worked with Uber and Lyft later on. Early on, we couldn't even use that. So we do whatever we can think of to try to satisfy a customer's need by going out and procuring parts all over the place. We'll obviously start with an OEM part, a manufacturer's part, but we'll work with remanufactured, even used components to try to get somebody back on the road. Down the road, the manufacturers have all been working, the various suppliers, to improve their processes to get things quicker. I think you'll see the second half of this year should be a goodly amount of improvement.
That's great to hear. Let's shift and talk about the people. And I'm not talking about the people you all need to hire, because we know that there's continuing workforce shortages. But I want to talk about the people that have been with you through the pandemic. And I'll start with Scott. You said part of this was actually kind of fun and a challenge, but What's been the impact on your people? You know, the heroes at retail, the ones that kept your distribution and logistics going when every day was a complete unknown, and even your corporate offices having to shift remotely.
Yeah, so we pivoted very quickly, as most everybody did. We moved all to our houses for those of us in support roles, but it's safe in the house. This isn't my house, but but it's safe where we were. I'll tell you, talking with the people at retail, especially those first few weeks when people were unclear about how dangerous it was going to be interacting with the public, and having those people show up at work every day to support our communities was amazing to me. And not just at Hannaford, but across the board, anybody that had retail stores and people still showing up to work. Our distribution centers, we have hundreds of people on shifts at a time, all showing up to get product out. And our volume skyrocketed because of the pandemic. People, obviously, all those meals that were eaten other places were now eaten at home, and to support that. So our volume spiked. People were working overtime. They were working long hours. People weren't sure what the future held. I'll tell you the transportation stories, because early on they were shutting down rest areas and places for truckers to stop on the road. And some of the horror stories that I heard from guys in the trucking business for us, it wasn't great, but they still were out there moving product. And we moved product all over the country here into the Northeast. So we've got people driving from Salinas and from Monterey, California, and that's a long way to go if you don't have any place to stop. So my hat's off to all of those people for doing all of the different things they could to support our communities, because at the end of the day, if you don't have a place to go to get something to eat, it's going to be pretty bleak pretty quickly. So just my thanks to everybody that did all of that stuff to support everybody.
Yeah. I'm hoping that someday I'm going to feel comfortable enough talking about some of these stories, but right now it's still too fresh. There was a lot that happened behind the scenes, that exactly what you're referring to, that are just incredible, and those stories will be told down the road. But yeah, there's a lot of things that happen to keep the wheels turning, that just incredible stories. But Tim, in the same vein, what's been the impact on your team members? Certainly one of the bright spots for LLB, and you talked about, being a little bullish and overbuying, but there was a significant increase in outdoor activities because of the pandemic, which you folks certainly benefited from, and the industry benefited from.
Indeed. Yeah, we were fortunate having 70% of our business, through online direct channel. And then the emphasis on outdoors and comfort were really our sweet spot. So business-wise was strong, and to echo Scott's sentiments, our operational frontline people were incredible, and the leadership group that created the environment for them to work safely, and then the employees showing up and getting it done. We're super fortunate. We didn't have a single shutdown day that I'm aware of within our fulfillment distribution operations. So all the while things were going on, we continue to process orders and support our customers. So incredible work done there. But one of the things that I've just kind of tuned in on is, for instance, in my supply chain and sourcing group, we've got staff here in the U.S. and around the world, and we're all working remotely, and the technology's been fantastic, and I think the productivity that's happened throughout has really been impressive, and that's a whole nother topic around what that means to the future. But thinking about the employees and the challenges we faced, and even the easiest things became challenging. The whole idea of, hey, order up a couple of containers to move some product out of this, vendor. That used to be an email. That turned into a full week's effort to get that, if you could get the containers to support that. And oftentimes you couldn't. I consider our staff to be highly professional, capable, motivated, but really looking at the challenges to them and just being able to deliver results. And they operate at a high level, and they're used to delivering results. And And despite their best efforts, it was difficult to get what we needed. So from a morale perspective and a burnout perspective, keeping an eye on the team, recognizing the work that's been done there, acknowledging the hard work and the challenges has been important. And I think the lasting impact on people, that what they've learned and the upside, but the concerns about, the hours, the time, the burnout. So, my advice, keep a close eye on your staff and recognize that good work that's happening.
That's great advice. So I'll ask this question of all three of you. So I'll start with Scott and then Wally and then Tim. One of the ways we've seen businesses deal with this supply chain issue is to perhaps try to limit the variety of goods or products being offered. So Scott, maybe, you're not going to have 25 different kinds of cheese. Maybe you'll try 15 different kinds of cheese. So I'll start with you, Scott, and then Wally, and then Tim.
Yeah, it's a great point. And as we talk to manufacturers, what we're finding is they're starting to slim down their variety in order to support getting as much product out the door as they possibly can. So the fewer changes they can make to the manufacturing line, the better off they're going to be. And so where you might see 12 different kinds of pasta sauce, you're probably going to get 6. We saw that last year with ice cream novelties became tough to get in the summer. And one of the leading manufacturers had just shifted all of their production capability to ice cream. So I think you'll see products that you always got not available for a while, and there'll be various timelines for that. The manufacturers are very optimistic about coming into 2022 and how quickly they think they'll be able to rebound. Now with the latest Omicron surge, who knows? Everybody's they're struggling with attendance and trucking and all of that stuff again. But I do think that we'll see that start to improve as we go as we get into the year. We were talking before. You're still going to be able to get food. You're going to be able to eat, but you may not get the variety that you're used to at your various stores. So be flexible, I guess, and try some new things and kind of go from there.
Wally?
Well, I have to say similar things. One of the things that's really changed, it's like going back into the 1950s in some ways, because used to be people would come in and they would order their vehicle and then they'd wait for it to come in. Well, we're here, there again. But it's interesting, though. We actually, in 2021, our vehicle sales were up about 20% over the prior year. And people have come to understand that this is the way things are for now. And I think for the future, you're going to see perhaps more inventories on the ground, but maybe a little less than normal. One of the things that's come from that is I think the manufacturers have come to benefit from seeing what real consumer demand is in certain areas and certain commodities. And so I think that's been really good for them, because simplification, particularly when you're dealing with so many components on a vehicle, is something I see coming from all the manufacturers in trying to limit the number of packages, using specific packages, and to be able to avoid some of the commodity issues that come up and be able to supply better. I also want to thank my team too, because every day they show up and something happens and a coworker doesn't show up, they step up and they do their job. I'm very proud of them.
Tim?
Just echoing certainly Scott's sentiments that the amount of new development we're doing and sort of some of the novelty type items within our assortment have had to take a back seat to focusing, the production capacity that's out there on the core products. So our customers have been really flexible and understanding in that regard. And hopefully as capacity comes back online and things stabilize, we can get back into doing more of that new development and experimenting with new materials. But right now, the key is really focused on the core products that drive your business. And even that's going to be tough. And the piece we haven't really talked too much about is just the ongoing pressure on cost, the supply and demand impacts on inflation. Everything from the farm and the mine all the way through raw material production and full assembly and logistics, cost pressure at every step along the way. So I see that as a real challenge for us over the next year to kind of manage that need for additional cost at every step in the supply chain.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I've been told by some of my retail members that now the cost of a shipping container is 3 times what it once was coming overseas. So not only do you have the added cost, you have a record number of days. I believe it's taking an average of 113 days now for a container to cross the Pacific. I did want to touch on a little something that we experienced and heard about from our members is, back in the fall when we were heading into the holiday shopping season, we saw the challenges that were coming. Holiday retail sales are obviously important for a lot of our members. And we tried to get the word out there early that consumers needed to kind of take that Martin's approach, which is if you see it, buy it and shop early. Because, if you wait until that traditional Black Friday to Christmas window, you may not find the item you're looking for. But my experience has been that consumers really took that to heart, and actually consumers were understanding about the challenges you were facing. Did you all experience that, especially you, Tim?
I'd say without a doubt, and the media there was a lot of nice air cover out there. You couldn't turn on the TV or turn on the radio without hearing stories about the concerns. So that was nice to see. I think for a company like LL Bean, who has such a big business spike around the holidays, for years we've been trying to find ways to flatten that out a little bit. So it actually sort of helped in moderating the flow of volume into us. So like I said, customer clear, honest communication to the customer about what's available, and then the flexibility that they've shown has really been fantastic.
And I guess one other subtlety that makes you different than our other panelists to a certain extent is, LL Bean does a lot of different seasons. So, you're now already probably focused on spring and summer, and you probably have an eye down the road for next year's holiday shopping season as well. You're always trying to stay ahead of it. That poses some unique challenges for you as well.
Yeah, we're developing spring 23 right now, and that conversation we just had around how much newness can we put into the line? Where can we focus? It is still developing as events continue to unfold.
Yeah. So we have a really good question from the audience. So let me pose it to you. Which parts of the supply chain shortages will never recover, and which of the resulting new ways of doing business will thrive? I don't know who wants to try to tackle that one first.
Well, I'll just say this in regards to, I don't know which part of the supply chains will never recover, but in terms of the way doing business, I think moving forward, there will be changes in our industry that will never return. For instance, I think it's likely that we won't have quite as large as inventories that we did in the past. I think that the manufacturers, the carrying cost of having thousands and thousands of vehicles on the ground is very high. And also the complexity of having all these different variables is high too. So I think that moving forward, I think we'll have higher inventories than what we have now, but I think less than what we did previously. So I think that's probably going to be something that's going to change. Also, the selling process, I think forever will be moving more and more online and right in the customer's hands, much more so, and very transparent.
Scott or Tim?
I was trying to dodge the which one will never recover. I don't have a great answer for it, but I think there are challenges in it as some of these manufacturers really struggle. I wonder about consumer habits and if those will change. I've got a friend with like 6 or 8 cats, and he's concerned because canned cat food's in a very difficult position. And did they switch to dry cat food and never go back by the time the manufacturers are on top of that? That could easily be. Most of the rest of it, I think they'll recover from. I think the way we do business is fundamentally changed and will continue to evolve that way. We have a big office building in Scarborough that we're talking about renovating and making some changes there. We've talked about the new normal will be you'll go into the office a couple of times a week, but not the 5 times a week or more. So I think that'll change. I think Tim's talked about it earlier about productivity. We didn't see a drop in productivity as people went home. People just got their arms around the business. Particularly at the start of the pandemic, people were working significantly longer hours than they ever had, and they were super productive and drove a lot of things. The e-commerce arm getting closer and closer to your customer as far as finding ways to get them product, I think is fundamentally changed, and that accelerated. Curtis, you talked about fast forwarding that 5 years. That's exactly what happened to us. We had plans for volume growth for 5 years, and we got that in 3 months.
Yeah, and I think that also is, Hannaford To Go is a great example. It got a lot of people to try it a lot quicker than probably you folks were forecasting. Yes. People found out that they actually liked it. They're doing it more often, and it becomes part of their routine. So consumer behaviors have changed, and retailer behavior has certainly changed. Tim?
I would, the focus on what would never return or what's not going to get better. When I think about it, I can't think of anything that won't get better over time. But what we're up against now, what I see is we have this strong customer demand, which is great. And we have this scarcity and this challenge that's making it so difficult to meet that demand. And talk about all those things we're doing on this side to get the work done and the challenges. But at the end of the day, business has been strong. My fear is, it's going to take business to soften, or if the economy slows a bit, capacity comes back up on the supply side. That'll put things back in order in the supply chain world. But, if I had to pick a lane, I'd say, hey, let's keep that strong business and let's keep fighting through those challenges versus solving the challenges, because it may mean a softening in demand.
I think you're right. We have a couple questions from the audience, so I'll pose the next one. What has been the biggest lesson learned during the 2 years of the pandemic?
Well,
I'll speak for us. I think.
Go ahead, Scott.
Sorry, Tim. Just the amount of flexibility that we needed to add to our business practices and different things, being able to turn more nimbly, I think was the biggest thing that we needed to be able to do. So,
Tim?
Yeah, I was just going to say, ensuring that there's a contingency plan behind everything. And oftentimes, you may have to pay a little bit extra to have that bandwidth, but it's sure proven to be valuable over these last 2 years to have that flexibility.
Yeah. And Wally, you have a thought?
Yeah, sure. Flexibility and just being nimble, I guess, would be another word, because things are changing sometimes minute by minute, whether it be reacting to a lack of supply or somebody's not showing up to work because they're ill. And so just having that attitude, can-do attitude.
We are getting some great questions from the audience. So Scott writes, what's the biggest positive that came out of these supply chain challenges on your companies? Permanent changes or improvements to your organization? And I know we've all kind of touched on this a little bit, certainly being more nimble, recognizing the contributions of your employees. Who wants to chime in?
Well, I'll just talk for our company a bit. The collaboration internally, we we're the product of several mergers that have created some challenges just organizationally, how we deal with each other and how we talk to each other. And pre-pandemic, the supply chain and moving product in and out was relatively routine. We were pretty good at it. We'd done it for a long time. Things didn't change that significantly, but we needed to work cross-functionally with our merchants, and all the areas of supply chain and the retail teams to make sure that we had the right product in the right place as much as we could, and then be super transparent about, hey, this product's not going to be back for 6 months. We need to make a different decision. Something else is going to spike, and we need to be able to be clear with our customers that this isn't going to be around, and it's everybody's doing their best and it's still not coming.
Yeah. Tim or Wally?
One of the things is we found that even though we didn't have the vehicle on hand, that people would still do business with us. And so we learned how to work with folks, set expectations differently for folks. I think that was a positive thing. I just love the fact that we've just learned that to give folks even more latitude in their jobs, they need to make a decision now, not go up the chain sometimes, just be able to be nimble in that way. And I think that's a positive thing for the customer, because they want to know where they're at and what can we do for them now.
Yeah, I agree with both of what Wally and Scott said around clear and open communication to your customers, and hopefully the behavior that we've seen in the past few years with people's willingness to flex a little and to bear with some of those challenges remains in place. It'll be hard to tell when things return back to quote unquote normal. We'll see. And then the other piece around the overall challenging some of the paradigms around how much inventory you need to service the business and how you play through that. Maybe deeper in the core and shallower in some of the novelties and how you play that. But I think there was some good learnings to come out of that as well.
Great. Nancy Marshall asks a great question. What products and services do we need here in Maine to help curb the shortages? And where are there opportunities for economic development here in our own state? This is actually a good springboard to mention that, one of the things that I think is going to pay dividends down the road was the federal infrastructure act that was passed in the fall. That's not going to provide immediate relief to some of the supply chain issues, but long term, improving our roadways, improving our ports is something that's long overdue. So, I'll start there and let you guys chime in, and then I'll also add from a state perspective, the work that our association, the Portland Chamber, a number of groups have done with the administration throughout the pandemic, like you all said, brought enormous levels of collaboration and cooperation. We have the state's 10-year economic development strategy that we've all been invested in. So, the focus is on bringing more people to Maine, to, getting wages up by at least 10%, and focusing on some of the core issues of tourism, food production, some of the other sectors has been really, really helpful. So I'll use that as a springboard and then turn it over to you folks to answer that question.
Well, one of the things that comes to my mind is to keep and maintain a good business climate, because, we're a population that's getting older, myself, but being able to have kids stay here and see opportunity in our state. It's a beautiful state, but oftentimes they find opportunity elsewhere. So I think it's really important to keep taxes low, and infrastructure very important, but generally a good business environment so we can have the best staff and the best teams.
Scott or Tim?
Those are great points. What we've seen in the short term and the natural attraction to the state of Maine and the flexibility that people now have to perhaps work remotely, or even attracting them to work at the company like our company here, But at the operational level and at the frontline employee level, the challenges of finding and maintaining staff and keeping the operations running presents an ongoing challenge. And I'm not sure exactly how to target that one, certainly around wages and finding ways like Wally talked about to make Maine a more livable place to be, certainly is a critical concern.
Yeah, I would say, having a couple of kids just out of school and, they're looking around, they're in different parts of the country right now, but, people can choose to live anywhere now in a lot of cases and work remotely. And I think encouraging them to look at Maine and sending them to come back and starting a family here, I think would be a fantastic way to go. And then the products and services piece, I'll just put a couple of plugs in there. There are a couple of companies that have started here in Maine to grow produce indoors, which is fantastic. If when I started in the logistics business years ago, I was stunned to find out that the cost of transporting broccoli from the West Coast cost more than the broccoli did. So there are opportunities there. I think back in the old days, and like Wally, I'm getting up there, but Belfast used to have chickens. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities here that we're trucking stuff from all over the country to get here, and I think there's an opportunity, and maybe not at scale, maybe it's a small business, but to pick off areas that have opportunity. Transportation is not going to get cheaper, and in sending people to build businesses here, I think it'd be great.
Yeah, those are great thoughts. And of course, I think of Springworks in Lisbon that are providing all your lettuce now. And
Yep.
Believe it or not, there's a lot of broccoli that grows in the county, not just potatoes. So it's great we're addressing those. I want to thank our panel. We're starting to push the 9 o'clock hour, but gentlemen, great discussion. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming today, and I'll turn it back over to Britt.
Yeah, thank you all so much. This was just outstanding, and I'm reminded from crisis comes opportunity, and no sector is more resilient than the business community. And this has just been a great discussion about the way businesses have adapted to all this and improved. So thank you all to all our presenters this morning for allowing me to be part of your conversation. As we conclude today's program, you can view a complete list of all the Chamber's upcoming events at the Chamber's website. We encourage you to subscribe to the Chamber's newsletter and be sure to follow the Chamber across all the social media platforms. We look forward to seeing you on February 9th for our next Eggs and Issues event of 2022. Hopefully we will be in person, and please make an effort to join us in person if we're able. We're going to hear from Dana Topman of Avesta Housing for a conversation on affordable housing. It's such a big part of our community, impacts the business community so much, and our whole way of life here in Maine. And as many of you know, Dana just recently announced that he will be retiring this year, so this event has become even more special with an opportunity to hear from him before he goes. A reminder also that in person, our policy has been to require proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test. We increased the distance between the breakfast tables and seat only 5 people at a table. The rooms are way opened up and there were fewer people there. Of course, masks are required and are worn when guests are not eating or drinking. So please make an effort to attend in person if you can. We'd love to see your face. To everyone joining us today, thank you so much for being here, for being engaged with the Chamber, and we look forward to seeing you next month.